She had the right ticket, the right seat, and all the credentials to prove it. But when she stepped forward, they still told her to wait. It wasn't about overbooking, it wasn't about a glitch, and it sure wasn't about security. It was about something else, something no one wanted to say out loud. Not the agent behind the counter, not the manager who looked the other way, and definitely not the passengers who stood there, watching. She didn't cause a scene. She didn't scream, but someone should have. Because what happened next didn't just stop one flight, it sent a message through the entire airport. And by the time people realized who she really was, it was already too late. If this story already has you locked in, make sure to hit that subscribe button. We tell stories most people try to forget. Drop your country in the comments. We want to know where you're watching from. Naomi Clark didn't need to announce who she was. You could tell the moment she walked into a room. Calm, sharp, unapologetic. She was headed to San Francisco that morning for a closed-door negotiation, a billion-dollar deal in logistics tech. Her company, Clark Grid Systems, had grown from a one-bedroom apartment to powering global supply chains. She had built it, step by step, while being underestimated at every turn. The irony? The airline she was flying with was one of the companies courting her for a joint venture. She arrived at the terminal in a sleek, slate-colored pantsuit, laptop bag on one shoulder, phone in her hand, eyes focused. Naomi didn't linger. She knew this airport, this airline, this exact terminal. First class, seat 1A, paid in full. No favors, no upgrades. As she moved toward the check-in podium, a white woman in a floral blouse smiled at the elderly white man ahead of her in line. "Morning, Mr. Jensen? First class today?" He nodded. She scanned his boarding pass, and he strolled through without a word. Then Naomi stepped forward. The smile vanished. The woman's tone shifted instantly. Flat. Mechanical. "Name? Naomi Clark? Can I see your ID?" "It's on the app. I already checked in. Still need to verify it." The agent didn't scan the pass. She stared at Naomi's face, then at the screen. Pause, then back again. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, slowly typing. Naomi stood still, not tense, not confrontational, just waiting. A second employee came over, whispered, looked at her, then quickly looked away. Naomi had seen this choreography before, not always in airports, sometimes in hotels, sometimes in offices. They didn't expect her. Not here, not in first class, not in control. "Ma'am, can you step to the side? We're having a problem with your reservation." Naomi raised an eyebrow. "What kind of problem? We just need to confirm something." The people behind her began to shift. One man checked his watch. A couple started whispering. She noticed the woman at the counter had stopped making eye contact altogether. Naomi didn't raise her voice. She'd learned not to. When you look like her, even being firm gets misread. She stepped aside. Watched another white passenger approach. Ticket scanned, no problem. Her phone buzzed. A reminder, meeting with Shanghai partners, 4 p.m. She looked out the window at the plane being fueled. The gate agent never called her back. Instead, she heard someone behind the counter say, "Can we get a supervisor here?" Naomi stood a little taller. She knew what was happening. She also knew what was about to happen. Naomi checked the time again. The line had cleared. The other passengers were now seated or walking down the jet bridge. She remained off to the side, like an uninvited guest at her own meeting. The gate agent didn't speak to her, not once. But Naomi heard everything. "She says it's her seat, but I don't see her name anywhere," the woman mumbled into the phone. Pause. "I'm not saying it's fake. I'm saying I don't feel comfortable letting her on without clearance." Her voice wasn't loud, but loud enough. Loud enough to let others hear that something wasn't right. Naomi took one calm step forward. "I'd like to speak to your supervisor." The woman blinked as if she hadn't expected her to still be there. "I've already requested someone." "Stroth," she said flatly. A pause. Then, "I'm just doing my job, ma'am." That word, ma'am. The way it always landed differently when they used it with her. Like a leash hidden inside a courtesy. Another man behind the counter leaned over and whispered something. Naomi heard it clearly. "She doesn't look like a first-class passenger." Her throat tightened. Not from surprise, she was long past that. But it still hit somewhere deep. The small, sharp violence of it. Public, yet private. Spoken softly so no one had to take responsibility. "I paid for seat 1A, she said calmly, to no one in particular. No one replied. Instead, she saw the gate door close. That door wasn't supposed to shut. Not yet. The agent turned to her, arms folded across her chest. We've closed boarding. You'll need to speak to customer service for rebooking. The same woman who refused to scan her ticket now had the nerve to pretend it had never existed. Passengers seated inside were peering out the windows. One of them was filming. Naomi didn't flinch. Is there a reason I was denied? She asked. The woman looked over her shoulder, then shrugged. It's probably just a system flag. These things happen. Naomi held her gaze. To whom? No answer. And then, as if on cue, a flight attendant opened the door briefly, spoke to the agent, then turned to Naomi and said, "This flight is full. We'll try to get you on the next one." Naomi's phone buzzed again. A message from her assistant. Client already in the boardroom. Zoom link live. The agent looked past her toward the next customer. Naomi didn't move. Not yet. She was thinking about every black woman who'd been told to wait quietly, to be polite, to not make a scene. And that's when she reached for her phone. No yelling, no threats, just one number, one contact, and a voice message that began with, "They closed the gate on me." The moment Naomi's phone call ended, she could feel the shift. The hum of the terminal seemed to quiet down. She wasn't imagining it. There was a sudden tension in the air, a shift that only happens when someone of power steps into a space where they aren't expected. And then the whispers started. "She's not even upset," one of the passengers murmured. "Doesn't even seem mad." "Yeah, it's like they're treating her like she doesn't belong," another added. Naomi glanced up from her phone, and for a split second she met the eyes of the man filming her. He quickly lowered his camera, but the damage was done. Naomi's phone buzzed again. It was her assistant. "Meeting with the CEO of the airline is happening right now. Can you confirm your status?" She didn't respond. Not yet. Behind her, the gate agent was nervously speaking to a manager. "She's not responding," Naomi heard. "She keeps insisting on her first-class seat. I don't know what to tell her." The manager's response was clipped. "You need to clear her or get her on a later flight. It's not my issue." The manager walked away, leaving Naomi to stand there, waiting for a solution that would never come. Naomi's attention returned to the people around her. It wasn't just the whispers that hurt. It was the way they looked at her, the glances that quickly turned away when she caught them, as if they were ashamed of something they didn't even understand. It was clear now. This wasn't about a seat. It wasn't about a boarding process that had gone wrong. It was about the uncomfortable truth beneath the surface. They didn't expect her here. At least 3 other passengers had tried to board since the commotion started. Their tickets? No questions. They were ushered through without hesitation. White faces, middle-aged men in suits, no side glances, no suspicion. Naomi stood her ground. She could hear the final call over the PA system. Flight 101 was about to depart. A flurry of activity behind her suggested the crew was now scrambling to fix what they'd made into a mess. It was too late for apologies now. "Excuse me," she said, her voice quiet but firm. A flight attendant stepped toward her, his expression unreadable. "Yes?" "I paid for a first-class seat," Naomi repeated, "and I intend to use it." The attendant smiled, almost nervously. "I'm afraid there's nothing I can do. You'll have to speak with customer service." Naomi blinked, holding his gaze. "I already spoke with customer service." And with that, everything around her seemed to freeze. The murmur of the crowd escalated into a ripple of whispers. She could see the wheels turning. Someone at customer service was already on the phone. Someone in the background was probably wondering who she was. Maybe someone had finally checked her profile. Maybe they were realizing, too late, that this wasn't just any woman standing in the middle of their terminal. This wasn't just Naomi Clark. This was Naomi Clark, the CEO, the one who held power they never saw coming. A few minutes passed in tense silence. It was as if everyone, even the security staff, was holding their breath, waiting for the inevitable. Naomi stayed calm, and then, in a calculated move, she turned and walked toward the gate agent's desk. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. But what she said next would change everything. Naomi didn't need to be loud to be effective. She walked slowly back to the same desk where she'd been dismissed, looked the gate agent dead in the eyes, and set her phone down between them. The woman hesitated, as if expecting a tantrum or a threat. Instead, Naomi only opened her contacts and tapped the name at the top of the list. Marcus Ellington, Board of Directors, Solaire Holdings. No theatrics, no dramatics, just a quiet call. Marcus, it's Naomi. Yes, I'm standing at Gate 17 at JFK. The airline your board is currently negotiating a $1.2 billion deal with just denied me boarding. Yes, they closed the gate while I was still standing here with a valid first-class ticket. I'll wait. She didn't break eye contact with the agent. The woman's fingers started trembling. The crowd, which had gone quiet, now leaned in, not physically but emotionally. You could feel the curiosity, the shift in energy, the sudden recognition that the woman they thought was powerless might not be so powerless after all. Naomi ended the call without explanation. 2 minutes later, the boarding bridge jolted. A staff member, not one Naomi recognized, jogged toward the desk with a radio in his hand. He glanced at Naomi, then at the gate agent. "Are you the one who denied this passenger boarding?" the woman stammered. There was a flag in the system. "There's no flag," he interrupted. "This is a corporate partner. You were supposed to seat her 10 minutes ago." People were watching now. Phones were out. Someone gasped when they heard the phrase corporate partner. The gate agent backed up, suddenly aware she wasn't holding the power anymore. Naomi didn't move, didn't gloat, didn't need to. She simply waited as 2 supervisors arrived, whispering furiously into radios. One of them stepped away to call someone. The other walked over to Naomi with a look that tried and failed to hide panic. "Miss Clark, we'd like to formally apologize for the inconvenience. You are absolutely welcome to board now. In fact, we've cleared the cabin to make sure you're seated with privacy and comfort." She looked at the man without blinking. "You closed the gate on me," Naomi said. "You let that woman humiliate me in front of strangers. Now you want to pretend it never happened?" He opened his mouth to speak, but Naomi lifted her hand. "Don't. Just don't." A pause. "Are you refusing the flight?" he asked, now visibly sweating. "I'm not refusing anything," she said, lifting her phone again. "I'm documenting." That word did something to them. Documenting. The mood at the gate turned frantic. One of the staff members radioed back to the terminal's operations center. "Yeah, she called corporate, one of the directors. No, we didn't know who she was. I don't know how she got flagged. She wasn't." Passengers were now staring outright, some whispering, others filming. One woman said quietly to her husband, "She's somebody. Watch, this is about to blow up." Naomi's next call was even shorter. "Pull our engagement with Solaire. Send a statement to PR. Clark Grid is pausing all aviation partnerships pending investigation, effective immediately." Then she hung up. She didn't raise her voice. But now, the airline couldn't get a single plane off the ground without clearing it with someone in legal. And the woman who told her this seat wasn't hers. She wasn't just wrong. She had just triggered something she had no idea how to control. The gate was quiet now, but inside the airline's corporate offices, it was anything but. A flurry of phone calls had already begun. Naomi's name was moving faster than any aircraft on the tarmac. Executives who hadn't even clocked in yet were being looped into urgent threads. Who authorized this denial? Did anyone verify the incident at JFK? Why wasn't she on the manifest alert list? In a sleek corner office overlooking Manhattan, the airline's vice president of strategic partnerships stared at her screen. Naomi Clark, Clark Grid Systems, partnered with multiple global carriers, known for decisive moves, clean exits, and never bluffing. The VP didn't even bother calling her assistant. She dialed direct. "Naomi, this is Dana Grant. We met in Atlanta at the shareholder event last year." Naomi cut her off. "Are you calling to apologize or to negotiate?" Silence. "I need to know where you stand before I say another word," Naomi added, voice steady. "Because what happened this morning wasn't a customer service failure. It was profiling, and it wasn't subtle." Dana took a breath. "We'd like to meet with you, today, in person or virtual, whatever you prefer." Naomi didn't answer right away. She glanced around the VIP lounge where she now sat, escorted, of course, after they scrambled to give her dignity they couldn't offer when she was at the gate. "You know," she said finally, "if I were a white man with a Patagonia backpack and a conference badge, none of this would have happened." Dana didn't argue. She couldn't. "And if I weren't a CEO, no one would be calling me right now either," Naomi continued. "I'd be standing in line waiting for someone to care." The truth cut through the call like glass, not because it was new, but because it had teeth now. Power had shifted, quietly, sharply. Dana lowered her voice. Can we fix this before it gets worse? Naomi didn't flinch. It already is. Back at the terminal, the gate staff had changed shifts. The original agent had been pulled aside, escorted to a back office, and replaced. No explanation. Just gone. Passengers whispered, "Was she fired?" Someone said, "They're covering up now." Another added, "It's already on Twitter." And it was. A 15-second video clip from a passenger had already hit social media. Naomi standing calmly while staff scrambled in the background. The caption read, "She didn't yell, she didn't threaten, but the flight still didn't take off." The clip was spreading fast. The airline's PR team was already drafting statements. "We do not tolerate discrimination. An internal review is underway. We take these matters seriously." Naomi saw the headlines coming before they were written. She'd been through this game before. Polished apologies, a month of online outrage, then silence, until the next one. But this time, she wasn't letting go. She leaned back, legs crossed, and said it to no one in particular. They picked the wrong woman. And for the first time since that morning began, the airline finally understood. This wasn't just a PR issue. This was about to become a problem they couldn't fix with a press release. By noon, the airline's upper management had convened an emergency internal session, one that should have been scheduled years ago. The issue wasn't just Naomi Clark anymore. The issue was everything her story began to uncover. Within hours of the viral video surfacing, past passengers started flooding the airline's mentions with eerily similar experiences. "I was stopped and asked to explain how I could afford a business class ticket. My husband was denied boarding for being too aggressive. He hadn't said a word. I filed a complaint last year. No one ever called me back." Naomi scrolled through the stories as she waited for her legal team to join the secure Zoom call. She wasn't surprised. She was furious. It wasn't just one racist gate agent. It was a pattern, a system built to protect itself first and question people like her second. "Naomi," her lawyer said, voice steady, "we've already found 3 similar complaints filed against the JFK staff in the last 18 months. 2 involved Black travelers. Both were closed with insufficient evidence." Naomi clenched her jaw. "Get me the names of those passengers. If they're willing to speak, I'll cover every legal expense." This wasn't about media traction anymore. It was about accountability. Inside the airline's headquarters, panic was spreading like smoke through a closed room. Department heads scrambled to pull internal training records, bias training logs, and security footage. One senior compliance officer whispered what everyone was thinking. "We've known about this for a while. We just didn't expect it to blow up like this." Because the truth was, gate profiling wasn't new, but no one with this much power had ever made it public. Back in the VIP lounge, Naomi looked around. Everything was quiet, luxurious, sterile. The very space that had once been denied to her was now flooded with staff tripping over themselves to offer food, champagne, even a private jet to complete her journey. She didn't touch a thing. "This room isn't an apology," she muttered. "It's a cleanup attempt." Her phone buzzed again, this time from a former airline employee she hadn't heard from in years. The message was brief. "I've seen what they're doing. Call me. I still have access." That was the moment Naomi knew. This wasn't just her story anymore. It was about to become a spotlight. An audit, a reckoning. The airline had spent years ignoring these moments because the victims didn't have microphones, didn't have boardroom access, didn't have the leverage. Now for once, they were cornered. And all Naomi had done was stand still and refuse to be invisible. It wasn't a campaign yet. It wasn't a lawsuit yet. But the cracks were showing, and the walls were starting to groan under the pressure. By morning, Naomi Clark was trending nationwide, not because she spoke to the media, not because she posted anything herself, but because the silence around her story, the quiet dignity with which she stood her ground, hit differently. And the internet doesn't ignore that kind of stillness, especially when it's wrapped in injustice. The airline's legal team was now on damage control. Internal emails began leaking, frantic conversations, inconsistent statements, and language that clearly showed the staff involved didn't know who they were dealing with until it was too late. A quote from one message made its way to a journalist. "Why is she even in first class? Recheck her credentials." That single line made its way into the hands of a local black reporter who'd followed Naomi's career for years. By lunchtime, the story had hit national press. Cable news panels began discussing the incident as a case study in modern corporate bias. Naomi watched it all from her office window, arms crossed. She wanted truth. So she called the former airline employee who had texted her the day before. When he answered, his voice was nervous but resolute. "They do this all the time," he said. "It's quiet. Sometimes it's marked as a flag. Other times they just don't process the boarding pass and hope you leave. It's not always written down, but we all know how it works." "How many complaints have been buried?" Naomi asked. "Dozens, maybe more. The ones that stick out the most?" He paused. "They usually look like you." She didn't need more proof. She already had a name, a face, a story. Now she had patterns. The airline was still hoping she'd take the offer they'd quietly floated. Private settlement, direct apology from the CEO, a future seat on the board. Naomi declined without blinking. "I don't want your seat," she told the executive. "I want accountability." That's when she called a journalist, not to complain, not to rant, but to outline her conditions. Full audit, public transparency, restitution to the passengers who'd filed complaints in the past and were ignored. The reporter was stunned. "So you're not just speaking out?" "No," Naomi said. "I'm changing the rules." By the end of the week, Naomi Clark's inbox was full, but not with investors, not with journalists. It was filled with strangers. Black mothers writing about how their sons had been pulled out of TSA lines for random checks. College students recounting how they were bumped off flights last minute due to weight distribution. Business travelers who had been asked to wait over there while others boarded freely. Most had never spoken about it before. Most had blamed themselves. All of them thought they were alone, but now they had a name, a face, someone who didn't let the story disappear. Naomi read every single message. Some came with receipts, emails from ignored complaint lines, screenshots of dismissive corporate responses. Others came with nothing but pain, and that was enough. Because the more she read, the clearer it became. This wasn't about her boarding pass. It was about a system trained to mistrust people who look like her. She didn't just want policy changes. She wanted something real, something measurable. So she announced it. Not through a press conference, not with a PR firm, but with a simple online statement. "I'm launching Clear Skies, an independent platform where passengers can report racial profiling in airports and airlines. No more closed doors, no more silent suffering, no more erasing our stories." The platform crashed within an hour from the traffic. That same day, a second former airline employee reached out. Then a third. All confirming what Naomi already knew. Internal reports were being manipulated. Words like aggressive, uncooperative, and flagged for behavior were being used disproportionately and rarely investigated. Within 72 hours, her legal team compiled a document that outlined a full case for racial bias across airport operations. It was undeniable and unavoidable. The airline issued a formal apology, this time with the CEO's name attached. But by now it didn't matter. The story wasn't Naomi's anymore. It belonged to the thousands who had finally found their voice because of her. She received a message from a teenage girl in Atlanta. "I saw what happened to you. I almost gave up on going into aviation. But now I know. Maybe we do belong in the sky." Because what Naomi had started wasn't just about corporate pressure. It was about belief. About rewriting the script that said people like her should keep their heads down, accept the disrespect, and move on. She wasn't moving on. She was moving forward, with every voice behind her. And for the first time in years, airline executives weren't just reviewing passenger policies. They were reviewing themselves. The hearing room was packed. Cameras lined the walls, senators flipped through binders of notes, and aides whispered into phones while reporters adjusted their microphones. But Naomi Clark didn't flinch. She sat with her back straight, heels flat on the marble floor, eyes steady. This wasn't a stage for her. It was a table she never expected to be invited to, but she showed up prepared. A week earlier, a congressional subcommittee had requested her presence to testify on racial bias in commercial air travel. Naomi didn't hesitate. She brought receipts, digital evidence from Clear Skies, a breakdown of 217 submitted complaints in just 72 hours, internal memos from anonymous airline staff confirming profiling patterns, case studies, witness statements, data. But most powerful, her voice. She didn't speak like a victim. She didn't shout like someone seeking revenge. She spoke like someone who had finally been listened to and wouldn't let that moment go to waste. Racism in air travel doesn't always wear a hood, Naomi said, voice clear. Sometimes it wears a name tag and a corporate logo. Sometimes it smiles while telling you you're not on the list. One senator leaned forward. Miss Clark, are you suggesting this is more widespread than isolated incidents? Naomi blinked once, then answered without flinching. I'm not suggesting, I'm saying it plainly. It is widespread, it is repeated, and it is protected. By silence, by bureaucracy, and by fear. The room went still. One aide scribbled notes furiously. Another senator glanced at a stack of pending bills related to federal travel regulation. Behind Naomi, an older black man from Detroit, also invited to testify, nodded slowly. He had been removed from a flight 3 months earlier for being unresponsive when asked to change seats. He was deaf. This hearing wasn't about one woman in one airport anymore. It was about how everyday bias hides behind protocol. Naomi didn't want empty apologies. She wanted structural change. She laid out 5 recommendations. 1. Independent anti-bias oversight bodies in every major airport. 2. Public data reporting on complaints by race and resolution status. 3. Third-party review of all flagged passenger incidents. 4. Whistleblower protections for airline staff. 5. Mandatory bias training tied to federal compliance, not branding. She finished with a sentence that didn't need a mic to carry. If a system is strong enough to fly millions across the world, it should be strong enough to treat them equally. Reporters didn't wait for the hearing to end. Headlines began rolling before she even left the building. Black CEO forces Congress to confront airline racism. Naomi Clark brings air travel bias to the front page. One boarding pass, one movement, one national reckoning. Back at the airline's headquarters, leadership wasn't celebrating their sudden spotlight. They were reviewing contracts, preparing legal teams. Their stock was dipping, not because of market conditions, but because people were paying attention. Naomi didn't smile when she left the building. She wasn't done. The sky was still unequal. But for the first time in a long time, someone was measuring just how deep the imbalance ran. And now, the country was watching too. Naomi walked into the Clark Grid headquarters just after 7 a.m. No entourage, no cameras, just a woman returning to the empire she built. Her staff had been watching the hearings, following every update, every headline, every clip. But none of them rushed to greet her when she entered. They knew her style. She took the elevator alone, straight to the executive floor. By the time the boardroom lights clicked on, her legal team and 2 senior executives were already seated, waiting. She didn't sit. Not yet. Pause all existing travel contracts, she said. And I mean all of them. Until we audit our partners for bias response policies, none of them move forward. One executive shifted nervously. Even Solaire? Especially Solaire. No one questioned her authority. Clark Grid wasn't just a tech company. It was now a case study in what it looks like when Black excellence refuses to beg for permission. Naomi turned toward the projection screen. A live chart displayed engagement across the Clear Skies platform. Submissions were up 400%. Traffic was international. People were watching, not just in the US, but from London, Lagos, Toronto, and Dubai. They're not just talking, Naomi said, they're organizing, and so are we. She unveiled Clark Grid's new Equity Compliance Division, a team dedicated solely to vetting corporate partners for racial justice alignment, not just on paper, in practice. Vendors who failed to meet the new standards would be removed. No exceptions. No warnings. We're not stopping at terminals, she told her COO. We're going wherever gatekeeping happens. Back at the airport where it all started, a quiet shift was happening too. The agent who denied Naomi boarding had been placed on leave. But the investigation didn't stop with her. Supervisors, logs, prior incidents, patterns. The FAA had launched a formal review into gate-level discrimination protocols. Suddenly, the industry was paying attention. Not because it cared, because it had to. Naomi wasn't chasing justice for herself anymore. She was building a framework that made it unavoidable. She sat down finally, letting the weight of everything land, but only for a moment. Then she looked out the window at the skyline. All my life, she said to no one in particular, They've told us to work twice as hard to get half as far. Pause. Well, we've arrived. Now we get to decide what happens next. At first, it was just one airline under pressure. But within 2 weeks, 5 others had quietly begun reviewing their own internal complaint logs, not because they wanted to, but because their silence now looked like complicity. Insurance firms, hospitality groups, transportation providers. Every sector that touched travel had seen what happened when a Black woman with authority refused to walk away quietly. And behind closed doors, companies were starting to panic, not over Naomi Clark's voice, but the thousands she'd activated. The stories on Clear Skies weren't slowing down. They were multiplying. The Department of Transportation announced a partnership with 3 civil rights groups to create a national bias monitoring task force. Corporate HR departments launched urgent training programs, not the kind with coffee and PowerPoints, but live audited procedures where real complaints could trigger internal reviews within hours. Still, Naomi remained quiet, strategic, focused. She refused every major TV interview, declined every speaking fee, ignored every corporate request for dialogue. She wasn't here to speak, she was here to build and make others answer. Her actions forced airlines to revise their contracts. Now passengers removed for behavioral flags had to receive written explanations, not vague excuses wrapped in customer service language. Suddenly, the burden of proof wasn't on the passenger. It was on the system. Some called her radical, others called her dangerous, but many called her what she was, unbought and unshaken. And Naomi didn't care about image, she cared about results. A few firms tried issuing public solidarity statements. Naomi rejected every single one that didn't come with structural change. Statements don't scare racists, she told one executive. Policies do. The ripple was now a current. Strong. Relentless. Smaller startups followed her lead, embedding anti-bias compliance into their operational structures. Investors began screening for companies with active equity audits. And yet Naomi never framed herself as a hero. She refused interviews that tried to crown her, because she understood the danger of turning justice into a branding opportunity. Naomi wasn't tired, but she was watching. She could see it happening. The same institutions that ignored her were now reshaping their approach, not out of sincerity, but survival. An airline CEO sent a handwritten letter to her office, not to apologize, to offer a seat on a newly formed Inclusion Advisory Council, with a generous stipend, of course. Another offered her a consulting contract to lead bias reformation workshops for their senior leadership. One even tried to rename a lounge in her honor, the Naomi Clark Executive Suite, as if her boarding pass had just gotten lost on the way to a branding campaign. She turned down every offer, because what they were offering wasn't change, it was containment. They didn't want accountability. They wanted her calm. They wanted her present but not powerful, visible but quiet. Naomi's refusal wasn't loud. It was deliberate. She didn't need her name on a wall. She wanted her people off the watch lists. She didn't want a council seat beside the same executives who pretended not to hear passengers being dismissed for looking suspicious. She wanted removal protocols rewritten and disciplinary systems activated, not buried in legalese. But the pressure wasn't just external. Friends started suggesting she slow down. Take the win, they said. They're listening now. A mentor warned her, you don't want to burn out or become a target. Even her CFO hinted that this might be the right time to let things cool off. Naomi didn't answer at first. She just looked at them. People who meant well. People who'd never been walked past in a conference lounge, or asked if they were lost inside a VIP terminal, or told they'd been randomly flagged while wearing a CEO badge. She walked to the window and stared out at the skyline. You think this is about me being angry? She asked quietly. It's not. It's about how many of us are told to be grateful when we're finally allowed through the door. She turned around, eyes clear, voice steady. But I didn't build this company so I could beg. I built it so no one like me would ever have to again. And with that, she made a new decision. As would be expected, when you build empires, you don't argue for respect, you command it. The crew thought she was just another Black woman in the wrong seat. What they didn't know has cost more than just ignorance. By morning, policies were rewritten. Apologies weren't just issued, they were broadcast. And those who thought she didn't belong? no longer do. Let this be a reminder. Never mistake quiet power for weakness. And never assume a seat defines who's in charge. If this hit you hard, subscribe to Echoes of Hope for more real stories that expose, empower, and elevate. Tell us in the comments, have you ever been underestimated because of who you are? Because here, we turn every insult into fuel, and every story into a reckoning. Echoes of Hope, where truth takes off.